Susan Turnbull is an expert on the topic of legacy. She has written multiple books. She has tools that start the conversation around legacy. And today she'll go in depth on why a legacy letter is truly the priceless gift. And with that, I would like to introduce the owner and president of Silver Oak Wealth Advisors, Linda Chow.
Thank you, Nubia, and welcome, my dear clients, Silver Oak team, and professional colleagues and friends. Today, we're going to talk about the ethical will and legacy letter. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and I wanted to share with you a personal story. When I was 13, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and after 2 years, he passed away. I was very, very close to him as his only child, and I couldn't comprehend what that loss meant to me. Fortunately, after a few days he passed away, my mom handed over to me a letter he wrote to me. And in that letter, he shared his deep sorrow for not being able to watch me grow up. And he also reminded me of all these great people around us who helped us along the way and be grateful for them. And of course, he asked me to be nice to my mom. I cried over that letter many, many times and used that letter as sort of a continuous reminder of my father for many years. But as I go into college, I faced new challenges and circumstances. And I so wished that he was there for me. And little did I know, when I turned 20, my mom gave me another letter. I have no idea that he wrote me another letter and asked my mom to wait until I turned 20. In that letter, he shared his imagination of how I grew up as a young woman. And he gave me advice about career, relationships, marriage, and even urged me to support my mom to find a new life partner. And of course, we didn't follow all the advice he's given to us. But whenever I think of my father, I think of those letters. And these are, to me, the most precious gift he's ever given to me. And I share this story because this is such a profound personal experience. And then when I met Susan Turnbull 5 years ago and heard about her line of work, I immediately recognized that I have received an ethical will legacy letter from my father. And I knew this is very valuable to bring to anybody. So Susan, I know you've been a journalist for many, many years before you dedicated your career to this, helping people write their legacy letters. Would you share with us and what do you think of ethical will be and give us some great examples?
Yes, and I want to say, Linda, that is the most beautiful story. And I don't think that in any of the presentations that I've given that I've experienced a more perfect introduction and a more heartfelt introduction to the idea. So that's an amazing story. Your father must have been a wonderful person and a very wise person, to have done that for you.
Thank you.
We're really lucky. You were really lucky.
I'm lucky. Yeah.
I know you are. So, so I was a freelance journalist for many years, and I had the experience so often of just seeing how people really appreciated someone asking them about some of the things that were important to them, and for them to be able to share and get some perspective on experiences in their lives or things that mattered to them. And I know that most people want to feel as though they've left some sort of a record of their life. Yeah. But honestly, most people are not going to write an autobiography, which is what I think a lot of people think that this is what they need to do. If they're going to leave a record of their thoughts or their experiences, they think, well, I guess I need to write an autobiography. And that's just not, most people are not going to do that. It's just really daunting. So it's been over 15 years ago now that I read about the idea of what was called an ethical will. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, that is a beautiful thing. Here you could create with intention an expression of what was important to you that would last beyond you. That you didn't have to write an autobiography to be able to express those things to your loved ones. And so, share with you some of my what I've learned about these documents, and be able to give you some ideas of your own. I'm gonna read you some examples and provide some structure for you to really think about how you might create this yourself. So I just really appreciate this opportunity to be able to share all this with you. So this is going to be a combination of Linda and me talking a bit, as well as seeing some slides. So I'm just going to pull up a slide, my slideshow. And because I want to kind of get into this, to take a closer look at, what is this thing? Just a second. What is this thing called a legacy letter? Linda's dad created this letter for her from his heart, spontaneously from his heart. He wouldn't have necessarily known that it was called anything. And many people have done this thing and not necessarily called it anything. But what I discovered when I first ran across the term of an ethical will, which I had never heard of until about 15 years ago, what I learned about that was it actually, as something to do with intention, actually has its roots as a formal instrument in the Jewish tradition, and it was called an ethical will. So that's the derivation of the term ethical will. And I'm going to give you some examples of some of the very oldest ethical wills here in a few minutes. But essentially, a ethical will, or a legacy letter, it's oftentimes called, is something really simple. It's a personal letter. You've heard about one, setting down evidence of what's important to you. And it becomes part of the record of your life. And that's what makes it different than other letters, is even if you share it during your life or change it, add to it after you've written it, ultimately you write it to be part of the record of your life. And in the end, it is a letter of love. It's an expression of love that you actually took the time, like Linda's dad took the time to be able to express himself. You take the time to express yourself and what's most important to you, to the people that you love. And the place that I always like to think about with what would you say in an ethical will is, how would you answer the question of what is it you want to make sure has never gone unsaid?
Yeah.
That's part of what an ethical will is. What do you want to make sure, for either personal reasons or practical reasons, doesn't go unsaid?
Mm-hmm.
Letter of love that you took the time, took the effort, to do it. So I wanted to just go back into the old Jewish history. So it has, the first time you see an example of what became known as an ethical will was about 800 years ago. And this is an example of a letter that a father wrote to his son. And that was sort of what it was. It was an expectation that fathers write to their sons a letter of instruction, essentially what it would mean to live a worthy or ethical life. So here is a line from a document. This man is talking about money, the theme of money. He talks about a lot of things in the letter, but this is one about money. He says, there's an olden proverb, go to bed without supper and rise without debt. Isn't that good? And then
That's what I would tell my clients.
You tell your clients that, Linda? Yeah, I think you should. And then defile not the honor of thy countenance by borrowing. May thy creator save thee from that habit. So this man is telling us 800 years ago that you should stay away from credit cards. Mm-hmm. But what I love about this is, yes, the language is very dated and it's very formal, and these letters are very prescriptive. They're, this is definitely rule from beyond the grave, and that you should follow this because I told you, very kind of top-down communication. But what comes across is the sense of responsibility that the fathers have to their sons, that this is just part of their job as their parent to be able to share some of their wisdom. And this man is saying to us 800 years later, I was a dad too. I lived on this earth too. I'm not that different than you. And maybe I have something that would be valuable for you. So these make really interesting reading. And this is from a beautiful book called Hebrew Ethical Wills. So, and when I first read about these and did the research about ethical wills, I just thought, this just makes perfect sense in the world. These are just, everybody ought to do these. These are just beautiful to do. So everyone at least ought to know what they are. And so then here's one. This is about 75 years ago. This is a man who's writing to his children, and he says, somewhere among these papers is a will made out by a lawyer. I hope its terms cause no ill will among you. Seemed sensible when I made it, but I am more concerned with having you inherit something that is vastly more important. And he went on to say that what's most important to them is their family, their siblings, their mother. Honor your family, honor the heritage of your family, take care of each other, take care of your mother. So that's just some examples of older ethical wills. And now, late 20th century, 21st century, this idea is really taking hold, this idea of intentional communication between the generations. And so a contemporary ethical will is not necessarily this old model of being really prescriptive and sort of lecture-ish. It still is an instrument of intergenerational communication, though. Still that kind of simple idea that to share aspects of your life with the people who are coming behind you is worth doing. But we don't live in 1190 anymore, so we don't believe in this kind of top-down prescriptive language. So a contemporary ethical will is really a gift. It's not intended to be a controlling document. It is a gift of yourself for the people who are going to read it to take it in as they will. It's a gift of yourself and a recognition of the value of intergenerational ties. So when I first read about ethical wills, I thought, this is the missing piece of estate planning. We go to all this effort and time and money to create these documents we can't understand because they're written in language we can't understand, legalese, and it's all about what we want our loved ones to have in a tangible sense. How about what you want your loved ones to know and understand? That kind of gift, what you want them to know and understand. And where is that handled in an intentional way in estate planning? It isn't. But the idea of a legacy letter, the idea of an ethical will means you have a legal will that transmits tangible goods and an ethical will that transmits the intangibles. And to me, that's like the perfect way to think about legacy in terms of what do you have to give to the next generations. That was where I took it immediately is, this belongs in estate planning. Everyone ought to at least know what this is. And I also just, that idea of what do you have to give to your loved ones in the biggest sense of the word just made me think, if you're not transmitting your heritage, your love, your values, important information, then aren't you really robbing the next generations of what they really deserve to inherit? Their full inheritance. You're actually robbing them. And of course, you're giving them those things all the time. It's just the ways that you're living and the ways you're expressing yourself, the ways you're talking. But the ethical will is really a chance to think, what are the few key things that I want to make sure that I leave in a legacy letter where I have a chance to say exactly what I want everyone to take in the same way.
Yeah.
So those are that's sort of an overview of the old ones from perspective. I'm going to give you some examples of now contemporary ones. But Linda, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I just want to comment on what you said is that culturally, money is often a taboo subject in the families. And the financial assets often passed on to heirs without the expressed values and intention clarified to heirs. And this actually can lead to different assumptions and made up stories in family members. And the worst scenario could even cause conflicts, resentment, and even litigations. So I completely agree with you. I mean, just from my own experience, seeing this disconnect, that ethical will is the missing piece that can really solve this potential issue.
Yeah, well, that's a great lead in actually to these examples that I want to share with all of you about some contemporary ethical wills which are really focused on some of these money issues. Mm-hmm. Most of these were written by people that I had the opportunity to serve as a ghostwriter for. So they've given me permission to share these. This first one is from a man who created a very complicated estate plan in his late 40s. He had was a self-made man, had done very well, and he was well financially, and he had created some dynasty trusts, since it was planned that some of this fortune of his would be passed down for many generations and people that might not ever know him. And the idea that they would just get a distribution and not know anything about the source of the money or the values behind the money, he thought was terrible. And he didn't, so he wanted to give the money in some kind of context. So he created an ethical will that each beneficiary would receive at the time of their first distribution. And this is one of the things that he said to them. What I ultimately want to pass on to you is far greater than financial advantage, but a deep appreciation of the collective history and values you carry in your bones. This is your true wealth. And this was about an 8-page document, and in it he shared the history behind the money, essentially how he built his business, what the business was about. But then he really wanted to share the history of his grandparents and his parents. His grandparents had come to the United States, one set from China, the other from Austria, and he really felt as though their stories were fascinating in terms of their own immigrant stories, but also that the values that they taught him were the ones that he felt had built the business. And he really felt as though that was really the true wealth, their heritage and their values that he wanted to pass on and make sure that his descendants knew that. So this is an example. This next one, this was written by a couple. They also were working on their estate plan. Their kids were in their mid-20s. They were also going to be receiving distributions from the trust at the time that very soon. And the couple, again, this is the same. They really wanted to give the money in context. So they sat down and together created a document where we have her voice, his voice, and then their voices together, where they're having a chance to put in plain English what the documents, the function of the documents that were set up. But more importantly, they really wanted to share their money stories. They wanted to talk about their different experiences growing up with money, and how that had informed their present values about it. It was very important to them that they share their values about philanthropy. This is a very philanthropic couple.
Mm.
And so this is a great example of a document that was written by a couple to be shared immediately. And the idea was that they wanted to use this as an opportunity to then have a conversation with their children, but they wanted the kids to have gotten the same information together at the same time.
Yeah.
So they say, the legal and financial documents may imply our values, but they do not provide a clear explanation of our motivations or a sense of the path we've taken to get to this point. We love you both unconditionally, and we want you to have a complete picture of our thinking and an explanation of the plans we have made. The most important matter is not how you got your money or how you're going to spend it. It's how you're going to spend your lives and what kind of people you're going to be. So I talked to them afterwards to see how the reception of the letter went. And they said, I don't think that our children, I don't think there was anything new in this letter. This is really a reinforcement of what we have been living out our whole lives. And so that's also sort of speaks to the truth about these documents. They really need to reflect who you are to have power.
Yeah. And then you gave about couples. It just reminded me that when I and my husband joined your workshop together, and how helpful it is for us to see each other's legacy letters, because we do have to really reflect on our own values and philosophies on many things. And as a shared, as a parenting approach, to understand and be on the same page, or to have a joint and shared vision and values for our kids, was really, really helpful. So this is great work for couples to do together.
Yes, and I can say that from working with the couples that I have worked with, what they have said is that the value of it was needing to sit down and really think this through, and talk together.
Yeah,
because they really had never really done that in a way where they really needed to articulate it. And in this particular case, this couple said the most valuable process for them was especially around the philanthropy. It gave them a real focus for their philanthropy. So that was great. And this is, I said, this is another example of how an ethical will, if it's shared during life, can become the basis of a dialogue. Starts off as a monologue, but becomes a dialogue. And I think that everyone should consider whether or not they might want to share their ethical will during life for that reason. Knowing, as I always say, that an ethical will is a work in progress, because you're a work in progress and your audience is a work in progress. So even if you intend to add on to it, may not feel quite finished, but you might want to consider whether it'd be helpful to share it during life.
Yeah.
Or share it during at the time it's written.
Yeah.
So This next example is from a man who traveled a whole lot, and he was always afraid that maybe the plane wouldn't bring him home. And his kids were fairly young at the time, teenagers, and he wanted to write something that would keep his presence alive in the same way that, you know, Linda's father wrote to her. And so this is a thematic ethical will where there were a few themes where he wrote a couple of paragraphs on each of the themes. And this is about the theme of ebbs and flows. He writes, "It was from my 9th grade science teacher that I first learned the concept of ebbs and flows. He drew diagrams of cycles on the board showing naturally occurring ups and downs. I see it in all areas of life, in biology, in business, in friendships, in marriages, and in society. Everything has its ebbs and flows. And sometimes when things aren't as I'd like them to be, it's reassuring to remember this idea and not to try to jump in and force things to change." And what I love about this is just really good advice. Wouldn't this be wonderful to get as a young adult? And what he said was that if by chance he passed away early, he wanted his kids to get this when they each turned 18. And I'm happy to say that he's still alive and he has given this to his kids.
Yeah, but I think, as a mom, as soon as my son was born, there's always this like, ever, and always wanted to be prepared and leave these things behind.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't this be wonderful to get as a young adult, whether you're, at any time? It just is, it's really good advice. So this next example is from a man named Fernando del Pino. This comes out of a book. I was given permission to share this, but this is a Spanish billionaire who was asked to write an essay in a book called The Wealth of Wisdom about his kind of thinking about how heirs in wealthy business families might think about the money that was coming their way. And so to help him think through how he really felt, he wrote this letter to his heirs, and he included it in the essay. It's about a 5-paragraph essay, 5-paragraph letter in a longer essay. And he writes, this is his final words in his letter: "Being is much more than having. Don't worship money, neither by over-consuming or hoarding, for it's just a lifeless tool. And do not allow yourself to be defined by your net worth. You are worth much more than that. I wish you fair winds and following seas in this beautiful journey of life." And one of the reasons that first of all, it's interesting that a billionaire is writing this, saying, there's more than money in life. This is a message that you might read in lots of popular culture. You might read it in a self-help book. But what I love about this is that it's just an example that when it comes from someone that you know, and it comes from someone that you're related to, even words that you might have heard before take on new potency. So the fact that he cared enough to sit down and write this says volumes about him and his values. Now, this last example is a letter of wishes to trustees, which is another kind of an ethical will, as a non-binding side letter to a legal document. Trustees I always hear from trustees that what they wish they had is more guidance from the grantor, because a lot of the trust documents, as you know, are very bare bones. And it's very helpful for trustees if they have more of a feeling about what the grantor wanted. And many grantors feel as though they have very strong ideas about what they might want to include, but a lawyer would discourage them from putting personal language in a legal document. So listen to what this couple said. Again, this is by a couple. "From our experience as entrepreneurs, the idea of them taking their educations and starting businesses is attractive. For this reason, we're in full support of using the capital to start a business. Provided there's a well-vetted business plan, we feel the decisions to start a business should rest with the child and should be encouraged, even if you are not wholly in support of it." So this is an extraordinary thing that they said. This might not be what the trustee would assume, and yet it was really important to the grantor that they said this. So this is another example where you really might consider, if you've set up trust documents, and especially if there's circumstances where there's a corporate trustee and the trustee may change, what do you want the trustee to know about what you really thought the function and the purpose of those trust documents?
Yeah. Hey, Susan, I've got a question here from the audience, and I think that's a good comment, is that have you seen any litigation where someone contests a legal will, trust, or probate because of the information in ethical will that they served is conflicting or expresses different intentions?
That is such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that, because that's really important. So in a court of law, an ethical will not hold water. The legal will hold water, and that has been proven.
Right.
So that's been litigated. There's no question about that. But that doesn't mean that an ethical will might seem to cloud intent, which might cause confusion in a family. So whereas legally in a court of law, the ethical will, the legal will is going to hold water, you need to be careful that you're not doing anything that confuses or clouds your intent. And if you are talking about your legal will and your ethical will, you should really share that language with your legal advisor or your financial advisor, just to get their perspective on it. Make sure that there's nothing you're saying there that might be confusing. But legally, the ethical will is not going to hold water.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. Very important.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. That I hope is sort of a nice review of what these are. And I be on video now to just kind of give kind of a summary about make sure I've covered all the points about what an ethical will is. So we've talked about letters, and ethical wills certainly were traditionally letters. I'm old-fashioned. I like the idea of letters because a written letter, whether it's handwritten or typed, people don't throw them away. Especially these days, they don't throw them away. And but that doesn't mean you couldn't create a video ethical will or a spoken taped ethical will.
Yeah.
They can be very appealing to people, and they can be great. The only word of caution I say is that if you want these to last down the road a few generations, or 800 years like the very oldest ones, technology is going to change.
Right.
And so be very thoughtful of that. And if you do use technology, then make sure you have a transcript made so that those words are still accessible, even if the machine is not available. So unfortunately, technology is changing so fast. But I hope that the written word on a piece of paper is ultimately not going to go out of style or not disappear. And you've heard some examples that were written by both individuals and couples. That's both are perfectly valid and great. And that's just up to the preference of the couple. You've also heard, I seem to have implied that these are single letters. And I don't want to imply that, because they're not always single letters. Sometimes they are different letters to different people, or sort of a theme and variations where you have the main points you're making to the body of people, and then you're having individual messages to individual people. Or in my ethical will is a collection of writing. It's in a file, and there's just a bunch of letters in there that I've written over time. So don't feel limited by what you've heard tonight. There's no such thing as a standard ethical will.
Yeah, I wanted to share with you, Susan, that actually my dad, before he passed away, I learned later that I was not the only one who received his letter. He wrote a letter to his parents, to my mom, of course, and then to also his siblings and close friends. So everybody I know really appreciated receiving the letters from him. Beautiful.
It's beautiful. Exactly. You make my point perfectly, Linda. You keep making my point more beautifully than anything. So how long are ethical wills? Well, they can be from a paragraph to multiple pages, but they're letters. So it's important to think, how long would be appropriate for a letter? And for most people, a 20-page document would seem like a long document.
Right.
So they tend to be, average 2 to 10 pages in ethical will seems to be, but it's important when you're sitting down to think about what would the tolerance of my audience be for a letter, how long, and that's helpful to kind of frame and, you know, contain this process a little bit. This is a letter. This is not an autobiography. When, you know, where to keep it. That's another thing, is to just think, you wouldn't want to have this on your computer or in a file and have nobody know where it is. So it's really important that you put a note with your important papers as to where it can be found, or clip it to your important papers. But that question of where it can be found is really important. You want to make sure that actually it is accessible. These documents also, another important point is they are works in progress. I think I've said this before, but if you thought you had to be as wise as you were ever going to be to create a letter like this, probably say no. Maybe next year I'll be wise. I don't feel quite like I'm quite ready to do this. And that whole idea of kind of facing your mortality is tough for people. But you know, you never know what is going to happen tomorrow, and it's never too early to think about what you want to say. There may be a time it's too late, but it's never too early. And so if you can think about putting down a few essential things and beginning your letter, and then think about it as something you add to or change as you grow older and your audience grows older, that takes a little bit off the weight of this. You may also be thinking, oh, I could never be so profound. This is going to require me to be so profound. And those examples I heard, oh, they were so beautiful, I can never do that. Well, that's another obstacle I don't want to get in the way for you, because these are authentically a reflection of you. So be yourself, and don't feel as though somehow or other you have to sound like somebody different than you already are. So please take the weight off of yourself.
Yeah, and that is such an important reminder, because we all wanted to be perfect. We all wanted this, you know, thinking about as a lasting for many, many years. But, you know, the reality is that the authenticity is the most important thing. And we can even share, you know, the mistakes we made, or that we're not so proud of, you know, and because it is a courage to actually just be who you are. And I think that you know, the loved ones always wanted to know that genuine side of you.
That's a really good point. And because you don't want your letter to sound like, oh, I'm just perfect, and I'm going to tell you how to live your life because I'm so perfect.
Right.
So that kind of human, and that actually stops some people from writing them because they don't want to come across like that. So to share your human side is really important. That's the heart of it. And to really think about, well, how would you share your human side? So one person I said, well, I know what I'm going to say in my ethical well. I'm going to give people a list of my favorite movies and say, watch these movies and you'll know who I am. So be creative with this. You know, there isn't any one way, you know, to do this. Do what feels most authentic to you. But in the end, this has got to be positive. You write these things to be helpful, to be beneficial. You can imagine what an unethical ethical will would look like. It would be controlling, it would be negative, it would be critical, it would bring up things that could never be answered if you had passed away. So you really need to think about, to be aware of the power of your words. And I read a beautiful quote just a couple of days ago from Toni Morrison. And she said, if you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. And applying this to legacy letters, words are really powerful. And so how can you use your words to empower somebody else? I think that's a really, really beautiful way to think about the opportunity you have when you create something like this. Yeah. And, you know, you write it to benefit other people. That's the reason that you do it. But you know who benefits first? It's you.
Yeah.
The writer, you benefit first. You can imagine how much peace of mind your dad got from writing that letter. I'm sure he did. And because the things that you say to your audience, you say to yourself first. And so to ground yourself in your own truth and your own beauty, your own sense of beauty and love is a really profound place to work from, and really usually will fill you with gratitude and appreciation for the blessings of your life. So it's a very positive exercise to do it. it can be very therapeutic
Yeah.
to do it too. And you're doing it in a spirit of humility, not control. You can't control. The idea is not to control the people that you're writing. They're going to, it's a gift of yourself. They're going to take from that gift what they will at the time, what they need at the time. And that may be different things at different times when they read the letters. I'm sure you had that experience, Linda. You took from it different things depending on your age and what you were going through at the time. So you're telling your own story, and it's a gift. So
I think what I got from you from this is that we really have to be honest with our intentions, to checking our intentions, making sure it's a good intention. And the controlling part, you probably could do it from the legal documents, but this is not about that. It's really about to share your love and to share your authentic self.
Very good point, though, to check your intentions. Yes. Yeah. So do you have anything else you want to add, Linda, before we go into, we've got an exercise for you and then some structure to help you think about.
Yeah, I was just curious, like from your years of experiences doing this, what are the common themes do you see in people's letters?
I think that people who come to me through their financial advisors, and many people do, because of how I position this, are coming because they really want to give context to the money. That's a really common theme. That they want to, they don't want to spoil their heirs, and they want to just share their values and give some context, some understanding about where the money came from and their own values about money. So that's a really common theme. But I'm going to share a slide in a few minutes that really talks about sort of the core, maybe the most important thing that that people ultimately come down to wanting to share. I'll just give you a preview of the slide right now, but it's essentially the opportunity to say thank you and I love you. That is also another, probably common to most all ethical wills, is the opportunity to really put that down, to create a record of their feelings, the emotional piece of this behind the ethical will. So that's another really, really common theme.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I want to just move on a little bit, and I want to put this idea of the legacy letter and the ethical will into the largest possible context, and think about it in terms of legacy, because a personal legacy document, an ethical will, is an instrument of legacy. It's not legacy, it's an instrument of it. And to really help you think about what legacy really is. Legacy is, I think it's a hard word. Means a lot of different things to different people, but for purposes of today, I want to use this definition, that your legacy is the difference that you make in the lives of other people. And if you think about legacy this way, as influence, it's also interesting to realize that you are both a creator of legacy. You're making a difference in the lives of other people now, and potentially in the future. But you're also carrying the legacy of other people, right? The people that have been influential in your lives. And so I think that's a very interesting way to think about your legacy in the largest possible light, and to help you think about what legacies you're carrying, the influences you're carrying, as well as what you want other people to carry of you. So to help you really think through this is a chart right here. And if you could take a piece of paper and a pen and duplicate this. So very simply, just put a circle in the middle of the page and then a line across the middle. And what I want you to do is, we're just going to take a couple of minutes to do this. I want you to put your name in the middle of the circle. And the middle line represents the present moment. And of course, the present is only a moment. And the line, and above the line, represents everyone and everything that's happened in your life up to the present moment. Underneath it is everyone and everything in your life from the present moment into the future. So I want you to have a little bit of fun with this, and think and write down above the line the names of one or two people whose influence you feel like you're carrying. So people who have been important to you, people that you feel that you've loved you, have loved you, that have modeled things for you, perhaps that had values that you took for your own. So maybe that's a parent, maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's a public figure. Just one or two names in that upper box. And then I want you in the bottom box to put down the names of one or two people or groups of people whose lives you hope that you can be a positive influence, have a positive influence in. So who do you hope is going to carry your influence and your love in your family, perhaps maybe beyond your family? Who might that be? So I'm going to just give you 2 minutes to do that. Have fun with this. And don't overthink it. Just put down some of those names. So I'm going to start off timing you in 2 minutes. One minute. About 15 seconds. Okay, well, that may be something that you may want to add to at home. Give it some more thought and add to at home. Linda, is there anything you want to add to that exercise?
Yeah, I was doing this exercise, and the past, the people who have touched my lives, it really brought a very sweet memory of them and deepened my gratitude and appreciation for them being in my life. And the people who I put it down in the future and sort of give me the feeling of a power, meaning that, it reminds me of this movie I saw, It's a Wonderful Life, when George Bailey realized how much of his work, that he didn't take it for seriously, when he wanted to commit suicide. And then he realized there's so many people that he actually touched, made a difference for. So for me, it's empowered feeling that that for the rest of your life, and there's a time, you could actually make a difference for these people. And I think that's a really great feeling of being in that position, like you said, when you're in a position of power, empower other people in your life.
Great. I agree. So this is the question when it comes to legacy and this idea of influence. And whose lives would you like to be a positive influence, and what do you have to give them with your time, your love, your knowledge, your money, your values? And that's a really big question that each of you are going to answer in your own ways. And I want to suggest today that some of those things you have to give, you could write down in a letter. So let's now look at how you might start to write a letter.
Okay.
And the first thing you really would be thinking about naturally is, well, who would the letter be to?
Mm.
So to name either a specific person or a group of people, get them set in your mind, picture them. And then to really consider what your primary intention is, your primary motivation. And this is interesting, Linda, your observation of a few minutes ago, to really check your intention. What is your intention? Make sure it's a positive intention, but get clear why you really want to do this, what moves you to do this, and why you really want to do it. And then I think a really important place to put yourself is in their shoes, the people who are going to be reading it. What kind of experience do you want to provide for them? How do you want them to feel when they read your words? That is a really good place to ground yourself, to put yourself in their shoes. What kind of experience do you want them to have? And then to ask yourself, well, what is the most important thing I want to tell them? Try to find a focus right away. If you only could tell them one thing, what would it be? What is the most important thing to tell them? And this is where I wanted to share this slide. This comes from these 4 things, the most important things. This is identified by a man who works with patients at the end of their lives. And what he has learned is that for people to pass on with a peace of mind, and for their descendants to be able to accept their death with peace of mind, one or more of these things needs to be said. And I love this list. Thank you. I love you. Forgive me. I forgive you. And for most people, they can easily write about one or more of those things. Jump to mind is the thing that, yes, that would be the most important thing that I would want to make sure that I had said. And that's a great place to start. Or to end. That may be the only thing that you choose to say in the ethical way. But that's a beautiful place to start. And that's the emotional piece that, as I said, your readers are probably most want to hear that they mattered to you. Linda, is there anything else you want to add to that? We're going to talk about now a kind of a structure that you could follow. Linda's going to lead this part of the discussion, but is there anything else you want to add right now, Linda, before I go to the next slide?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that Susan, when I was listening how you structure the legacy letter and especially these money stories and letters you've shared with us, oftentimes, we talk about that in our meetings with clients, and especially in our women's circle gatherings and in the finance 101 with children, for the education. When we started, to think about creating family wealth legacy, starting with the stories, how did you grow up with money? And what did you learn from your parents about money, either through their actions or words? And how this wealth was created in the family? What kind of decisions, choices, or sacrifices did you make? And what risks did you take or not take to get you where you are today financially? So these are really wonderful stories, and also they're the stories to reflect your money values. Talk about what you feel proud of. Talk about what are the regrets and the lessons you've learned about money. Maybe something you were never taught as a child, but you really felt important to pass on to the next generations. And how these are choices aligned with your values and beliefs. What does that mean, to have money, and what do you think money can do or cannot do? We all have a different philosophy and beliefs about money. So, talking about, how you spend, how you save, and how you share, even though this sounds like a financial decisions, but it really is a true reflection of your values and your beliefs. And then, the last thing is like, what is your definition of success? We all have our own definition of success. I think it's important for your loved ones to know what your definition is. And, when we are looking at the financial assets, we could have some letter of instructions to, share that how you expect them to handle the inheritance. What do you want them to do with it? And what does that mean to be financially responsible? And what family legacies, special assets, or business or real estate that you really want your heirs to protect and preserve. And these are the things, to answer the why behind the what. And I think the answers to these questions would give so much color and context to the loved ones, and would be so much more, valued and easily remembered. So that's sort of the way that I see in the line of work I do, how to apply your concept to this.
Yeah, there's some really good questions here, and it sounds like, Linda, that these are some of the things you would like to talk to your clients about as well, and the idea that they actually go beyond a conversation and put them down in a letter for their loved ones is here's an opportunity to do that. Not just have it be a conversation with you, but a conversation that they have with their families.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done in conversations, but it also can be done in the legacy letter, which is
right.
An excellent way of doing that.
Right. Well, that's so certainly your values around money. There's lots of things that can be covered in a legacy letter. This is a great structure for you to think about creating a letter that is focused around your values, the story and your values about money. And so I think this could be a very valuable structure for you to follow. I do have some resources that I wanted to share. This is a guidebook that I wrote about a step-by-step guide for creating your ethical will. And this is a kind of a workbook style book, which is really a brainstorming tool that kind of opens up your mind to all the things that you could talk about in an ethical will, but then helps you really find a focus and narrow it down so that it's something that doesn't become overwhelming for you. And that the step that you take about choosing your focus is really critical to making sure that you don't get overwhelmed by this. And so choosing a focus like the stories behind the money, your values behind the money, is an excellent focus, certainly in my experience, and very relevant to the work that you're doing with Linda, and very important to your heirs, no doubt. But this is a book that could be found on my website if that's something you want to take a look at. I also have developed these cards, these conversation cards. These are, they can be used as conversation prompts. They can also be used as writing prompts, but it's an opportunity to just really reflect on some of the most meaningful experiences or thoughts that so, some of the ideas and experiences that maybe it's never occurred to you to really talk about.
Yeah, and you shared a card and a couple of minutes ago.
Yes, the picture your legacy card you got to see. Yeah,
I love those cards, Susan. I'll tell you that I ordered a bunch of them, and I've used it in many conversations, especially in the women's circle gatherings. We share these stories, and those are great questions with a beautiful, beautiful visual.
Well, thank you. They are really magical to watch what happens with people when they pull a card or choose a card. And it's amazing what stories people tell very quickly. So this is just a kind of a reminder of, I have had a really rich life. I am leading a really rich life. There are many things that are very important to me. And to kind of be reminded of that, and to be reminded of how much how blessed you are. And all you have to appreciate and all you have to share, these cards really kind of plow the mental ground for that can then really help you when you think about what you want to put in the letter. Yeah. So I also do, Linda mentioned a workshop that she and her husband took. I do give a workshop once a month. It's a 2-hour workshop that really enables you to essentially chain yourself to a chair for 2 hours and actually begin to write something down. And it's not torture, even though I said chain to your chair. It's a gentle way of just helping you really give you the time, this writing time in the workshop where you really have time to respond to a couple of prompts and actually begin to get something down. And that the challenge of getting started is maybe what's the hardest of all. Once you get started and understand how meaningful it is. And I have to say that I've said this before, but it's a great reward for you. And you feel that instantly the minute you actually begin to put something down on paper. So that's the experience I want to give you in the workshop.
Yeah, yeah. And the time and the space that we could just do it and get it done. It's just
Right. Right, and it's it's just 2 hours, and so it's a very good way to get started. So that's kind of Linda. I think that you were going to wrap things up here. That's the end of my formal presentation.
Thank you, Susan. That was very, very informative and insightful. And I think we all, learned a lot from these great examples you shared and experiences. This pandemic is really profound in the way that it reminded us of how unpredictable a life can be, and what truly matters and what we really care about. Like you said, it's never too early to think about what you wanted to leave behind. So I encourage everyone to tell your stories, to share your love and appreciation, to forgive and ask for forgiveness, and in that process to heal, to inspire, and to hope. So to our dear, dear clients, Silver Oak, if you're watching this, please know if you would like to create an ethical will on your own, we're here to help and support you to fulfill your best intentions. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar. And we wanted to hear from you, so take our survey when this completed. Thank you. And thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you all for your interest in attending.